family, gather close. They say the most dangerous thing you can do in a haunted place is not to scream, but to whisper. Not to run, but to stop and listen. And the most fatal trespass is never through a broken window or a locked gate. It is through a breath, a sentence, a few words spoken into a silence that was never meant to be broken. This is not a story of a ghost you can chase away with light. This is a story of a law older than headstones, written in the language of hungry soil and patient shadow. This is the Dread Codex. And it begins where all true covenants do, with a child, a dark night, and a debt he never meant to incur. My name is Jonas Webb. I do not walk in old woods after sundown. I do not answer a voice that calls my name on the wind. And I never, ever speak to the dark. This is why. In the fall of 2016, in the forgotten hills of Western Virginia, a 12-year-old boy named Jonah Miller paid a price for a moment of fear. His family's farmhouse clung to the side of Miller's Hollow, a place where the land felt heavy, like a sleeping beast. And at the farthest edge of their property, shrouded by oaks and choked with ivy, was the old Baptist grove. It was not a cemetery. Not officially. It was a scar. A patch of land where the first settlers buried their dead before the soil was blessed, before the rules were written. The stones had been swallowed by time, the names erased by moss. The oldest locals knew. They'd say, "The grove takes care of its own. You let it lie." Jonah's mistake was simple. A faulty water pump. A full bladder at 2 a.m. The only option was the outhouse, a skeletal thing at the tree line. His mother, Eleanor, stood on the back porch with a flashlight, its beam a shaky yellow finger pointing into the void. "Quickly, Jonah," she murmured. He was quick. But as he fumbled with the latch inside that airless, pitch-black box, the childhood terror rose in his throat, the certain primal knowledge that something was standing right outside the thin wooden door. Listening. Panic is not logical. It speaks for you. And as he burst out, heart hammering, he didn't scream. He spat words into the night, a shaky, defiant bluff meant to arm himself against the nothingness. All right, I see you. Just leave me alone." The words didn't echo. They were absorbed, as if the darkness itself had caught them in a net. Then it breathed. Not a wind. A breath. A cold, viscous sigh against the back of his neck. It carried the smell of overturned earth, of petals rotting in a closed fist, of old iron left in the rain. He ran. A blind, sobbing scramble back to the porch light. His skin was cold as river stone. "He breathed on me," he chattered, eyes wide and blank. "The man in the trees, he breathed on me." They brought him inside, built up the fire. But the cold was in his bones, a chill no flame could touch. The next morning, he was pale as paper. He stared at the empty space above the fireplace. "The wet man," he whispered. "He's dripping." There was no water. Then the humming started. A low, droning tune that wasn't a tune. It sounded like a church hymn played on a rusted music box, the melody slipping backwards. He hummed it in his sleep. Doctors found nothing. Sedatives slid off him like water. He'd lie awake, holding whispered conversations with the empty corner of his room. Then he began to speak in voices that were not his own. A woman's voice cracked with centuries of tears. "My baby, my sweet baby, where did you put her?" A man's, guttural with rage. "Liar. Thief. The deed is written in blood," a child's, singing a rhyme. "Dig a hole deep and true, one for me and one for you." He knew secrets. He looked at his grandmother and called her Martha, the name of a sister born still and silent, a name buried for 80 years. One night, they heard a new sound. Shush, shush, shush. They found Jonah in his room, not on the floor. In it. His fingernails were torn away, his fingertips raw pulps, clawing relentlessly at the floorboards, digging down toward the dirt beneath the house. Digging to get out, or to let something in. Their last hope was a man who was not a priest. Reverend Amos Blackwood. A man who understood that some things are not demons to be cast out, but terms to be renegotiated. He didn't come with a Bible and holy water. He came with braided sage, salt-soaked twine, and a pipe filled with bitter tobacco. In their parlor, with Jonah bound in a chair, Blackwood spoke. Not to the boy, but to the room. "You have your ground," he said, his voice like grinding stone. "The grove was your rent. The boy is not your payment." The temperature dropped. The shadows in the room didn't just darken, they thickened, pooling like oil. And Jonah's body became a doorway. The voices spilled out, a cacophony of grief and rage, until one final voice silenced them all. It came from Jonah, but it was the sound of the grove itself, a low subterranean grind, like boulders shifting in a deep stream. The boy spoke. "The boy sees. The flock is hungry." Blackwood's face was grim. He spoke from fear. Not kinship, the words are the seal. The debt is owed. "We keep what sees us. For hours it was a war of wills." Blackwood bargained. He promised what the dead truly craved, not a soul, but remembrance. The Millers would clear the grove. They would find every stone, speak every forgotten name in a yearly rite. They would give the forgotten the dignity of memory. A long, hollow silence filled the room. Then a sigh, a vast collective exhalation of cold air, flowed from Jonah's lips. He slumped forward, a confused, sobbing child again. They thought it was over. Covenants are binding. The Millers kept their promise. They cleaned the grove. They spoke the names. Jonah grew up. He left for college. He studied architecture. He tried to build a life out of straight lines and solid plans, far from the hungry soil of the hollow. Last week, he was alone in an abandoned plantation chapel for a school project. The light was failing, painting the dust in long, deep shadows. And in the silence of the choir loft, he heard it, the faint backwards hum. He turned. They stood in the gloom. The watcher, tall and thin, a stain of deeper darkness. And behind him, faint as mist, the weeping woman, the cursing man, the singing child. The whole congregation. The watcher stepped forward, not on the floorboards, but through them. And Jonah's mouth moved without his consent. The same terrified, fateful words from his childhood, ripped from him once more by the very death they created. "All right, I see you." The watcher's face cracked in something like a smile. And a new voice filled the silent chapel. A chorus of whispers, speaking as one from Jonah's own throat, a voice that has lived inside him ever since, that answers his thoughts when he's alone. "The covenant is eternal, brother. The flock remembers its own. We are always listening." This is the story of the watcher in the grove. Remember. The oldest terrors are not those that break in. They are the ones we invite with a whisper. They are the laws etched not in stone, but in silence. They mistake fear for fellowship and a child's plea for a sacred vow. So listen, family. If you walk in a place where the shadows hold their shape too long, if you feel a breath that is not the wind, if the silence feels like it's waiting for you to speak, hold your tongue. Some places are not haunted by the dead, but by their desperate, lonely laws. And some words are not just sounds. They are signatures, written in soil, sealed with a breath. Send your stories to contact.thedreadcodex@gmail.com. Your truth becomes our tale. Until next time, may your path be lit. May your nights be quiet. And may your faith be your own. Good night.